Hey everybody, welcome to the Coding Zoo. If this is your first time joining, my name is Shane. I am a self-taught engineer of 20 years. That's right. I taught myself how to program and I've been doing it for 20 plus years. So in this video, we're going to cover who should not think about doing that, who should not think about becoming a programmer. We're going to cover what you should learn first and what order as a self-taught programmer to get your first job. We're also going to point you to various resources that help you learn. And we're going to try to give you ideas of once you've gotten to a certain level of learning, how you can prepare to get your first job, how you can go about getting your first job. So if you are a person looking to teach themselves to get into programming with or without a degree, this video will be helpful for you. Stick around. We're going to jump right in. So who probably shouldn't try to be a self-taught engineer, or maybe even shouldn't even go to college to become a software engineer? Who shouldn't do that? Keep in mind, this is just my opinion, but from what I've seen, this is often the case for people with certain personalities are going to be more successful as a software engineer. And that personality includes people who like to learn. You really have to like to learn to be a software engineer. I started programming when I was probably teenager, maybe like 10, 11, 12 actually. Started learning on my own because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed exploring the computer, enjoyed exploring the language I was learning at that time. So if you're going to be a self-taught programmer, it's hard. There is a lot to learning, and you have to be the type of person who likes to learn, right? If you're not the type of person who likes to learn, then becoming a self-taught software engineer is probably not the way to go for you. I would also argue that if you don't like to be consistently learning, being a software engineer, even through college, is probably not the right career choice for you. Why? Because my field, software programmers, we are constantly learning, and we don't always get to take classes or courses to learn. We're often learning on our own by reading, searching the web, reading books, exploring and trying new things, right? We are constantly learning. So in my last 20 years as a software engineer, I've had a great time. Why? Because I love to learn. I love to constantly grow. So if you're not that kind of person, this is probably not the career choice for you. Another key personality trait, in my opinion, and keep in mind, again, this is just my opinion, is you also need to be the type of person who likes to problem solve. You like to solve problems. If you like riddles, if you like math problems, if you like algebra, if you like solving problems, then programming is probably a good choice for you. That's what we do. We solve problems. We're constantly solving problems. We're constantly creating stuff. So if that's something that interests you, that you enjoy, then it might be a good choice for you. If not, you might want to reconsider. All right, let's go ahead and jump into what most of you are here to learn, and that's what language should you learn, or what should you learn to get a job quickly as a software engineer. There's many things you should learn. The first thing I would recommend is you need to pick a language and you need to learn that language deeply. If you're trying to learn many different languages and learn a very high level, don't do it. That's not good. Pick a language, learn it deeply, become an expert in that language, try to get jobs in that language. If you want to learn the other languages later or get into a certain field later, then once you got your foot in the door, you can do that. You can do that later. The main thing now is to become more or less a master of a particular language. You want to learn deeply. Now, what language would I recommend? Well, you'll definitely hear people talk about Java, C++, especially Python, all these different languages that are really high job market. There's a lot of job market for it, right? JavaScript's one of them too. JavaScript has one of the highest job markets around right now. JavaScript, there are a lot of jobs in JavaScript right now. So I recently watched a video of someone said, hey, you should probably learn Python. It's easy to pick up. It's very easy to learn as your first language, and it's a good language to learn the basics from. Well, I kind of agree and I kind of don't. right? Python is a good language to learn. The market for it's growing, it's huge. But in my opinion, the entry level barrier into a Python job is very high. As a person who's self taught, trying to get a Python back end job, you're probably not it's going to be hard. It's very hard. Don't get me wrong. There are probably people who do it, but there are better languages than Python for that. So one thing about Python is, unless it's a specific field like artificial intelligence, AI, or data, or DevOps, unless it's a specific field, usually Python is used in conjunction with other languages. You might use Python and Java. You might use Python and C#. There's usually, from what I've seen, Python, for the most part, has been used as kind of a language that's been paired with a different language, right? Now, there are Python web shops out there. But if you compare the job market for Python web shops to the other different choices, you're going to see it's probably low. So you can do front-end programming with Python, but the amount of jobs available for it are probably low compared to the language I'm going to encourage you to learn first. Same for Java. Java is huge. I've been doing Java for probably 15 years. Now, is it constantly growing as fast as the others? Well, it's not growing as fast as the new languages, right? You may have a new language that's growing 500% each year. But if it's 500% of 0.005% of the market, what does that mean as far as jobs? It doesn't mean much. There's not many jobs for that new language. So while that language may be growing and maybe fun, it's not probably the right one to learn first to get a job. I'll take Java. Is Java growing that much? I wouldn't say it's growing. I'm not sure if it's growing. I think it may be even declining, but there are so many jobs out there. Java is here to stay. Java is going to be around for the next decade. It's been here for 2 or 3 decades. It's not going anywhere. Go to your bulletin boards, your job boards, search for the language in different areas, compare the languages of job counts. You're going to see Java, JavaScript, and Python are very high. A lot of jobs for those. So out of those 3 languages, Java, JavaScript, Python, I'm trying to communicate to you, don't do Java, don't do Python, learn JavaScript. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that because JavaScript is one of the easiest, the lowest barriers to get into as far as job market for a self-taught engineer. You're more likely to get hired for doing front-end JavaScript work than you are for doing back-end Python or Java work. There's definitely a higher barrier to get through to get a job working on the back end versus working on the front end. Now, is it possible? Will you find people that've done it? I'm sure you will. I'm sure you can. But as far as the majority people who are starting to program and getting programming job without a degree, they're starting on the front end. That, in my opinion, is what you need to do to get a job in software engineering as quickly as possible. Learn the front end. And what's the best way to invest on the front end? Learn JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Those are the 3 main things you need to learn to get a career quickly in software engineering. Now, if you want to get on the back end work, if you want to get into AI, if you want to get into back end services, you want to get into any type of field that requires back end work, you want to get into gaming with C++, any of those fields, you can do that later after you get your foot in the door. First, get your foot in the door, get that job, get a job for a year or 2, and then start learning those other languages to move to that type of field that you want to go to for your career. So, learn JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. I highly recommend that you learn very deeply these 3 items. Don't learn at a high level and then jump to other things. Become an expert in JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, especially JavaScript and HTML. So while I do stress learning JavaScript and HTML and CSS deeply first, there is one other thing you also want to concentrate on as you get a good grounding in that language in JavaScript. Once you get a good grounding in JavaScript, you need to start learning some basic fundamentals of algorithms and data structures. You need to learn what the basic data structures are and what type of algorithms can be used with those data structures. That's kind of a key thing to learn as far as job interviews and knowing how to do something on your job. So JavaScript, HTML, learn it deeply. CSS, learn it, and learn basic algorithms and data structures. Now you're gonna have people to tell you to learn like full stack type technologies, right? I don't recommend it. I don't recommend you focus on the back end. I don't think you really need to learn how to use Node.js on the back end. I don't really think you need to learn how to use Java on the back end or Python on the back end right now. You don't necessarily need to learn how to be a full stack engineer. If you learn to be a full stack engineer, you're kind of going to get basically a high level, broad learning, right? You need to focus on learning deeply. Become an expert at front end. Learn JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Learn those deeply on the front end. Now you're going to need to know how to interact with the back end by being able to call services from JavaScript, but that's on the client side. Learn that on the client side. You don't necessarily need to know how to write stuff on the back end side of programming. So if people try to encourage you to be full stack, you can do that and you can get a job that way. I would much rather have a front end developer who knows it very deeply than to have a full stack developer who barely knows a little bit of the skim of, basically the skim of the surface. So that's just my opinion. I highly recommend focus on the front end. You can learn the back end later. You can become full stack later. So to repeat myself again, learn probably the third or fourth time. Learn JavaScript, learn CSS, learn HTML, learn it deeply. Learn data structures and algorithms. Don't worry about full stack right now. Don't worry about other languages right now. Learn those core things, learn them deeply, right? Now, when I say learn those deeply, what I'm referring to is learn the core. Learn core JavaScript. Learn JavaScript inside and out. I'm not saying go learn every JavaScript framework out there. There are tons of JavaScript frameworks out there. You cannot learn them all. Learn the basics. Learn core JavaScript. Know it inside and out. And we're going to tell you about some good materials to do that in a few minutes. Now, once you've learned those core things deeply, then consider jumping into a front-end framework in JavaScript. I would recommend React. React.js is huge. There's a huge market for React.js and also for Angular. I would recommend React.js. So once you have learned JavaScript and HTML and CSS, you know it well, learn React.js. And that's kind of like the icing on the cake, right? If you learn core JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, that's going to get you a job. But if you want to make it easier for yourself, also learn React. React is kind of like icing on the cake. It will definitely help you in your job search. All right, so now how should you learn? How should you learn these things? How should you learn JavaScript, HTML, CSS? How do you approach learning? There are tons of resources out there for you. Just to name a few, there's freecodecamp.org. There's places like My Coding Zoo, the Coding Zoo. We have an HTML building blocks playlist. We have a CSS building blocks playlist. We have a JavaScript building blocks playlist. You can watch those videos in order and learn. There's tons of YouTube channels you can learn each of these languages. I would recommend, along with that, though, you find something that's a little bit more structured. You can find online courses on Udemy, Codecademy. You can also find excellent books out there to learn from. There's a lot of resources out there. Let's say that you bought 5 books, paid $40 each. That's $200. You just spent $200 versus what? How much is college these days? I forget. It's up there. What? So $200 is a great investment for a high-paying career. So find some good structured books. Now, you don't need books. You can learn from videos. You can take online courses. You can learn from different places here and there. But I recommend you find a place that takes you through a structured program instead of just learning a little bit of this here, a little bit of that here. Learn things in kind of in a certain order. I recommend that. One such books that I would recommend for JavaScript, and if you learn these books, if you learn this book set inside and out, you know JavaScript plenty enough to get a job. That book set is called You Don't Know JS. So here, I think I've got one right here. You Don't Know JS. So there's 5 or 6 books in this series. I'll put a link to a video up here, and I'll also put it down in the comments where another video where I talk about this book set. This is an excellent book set. This helps you learn JavaScript inside and out. You really learn core JavaScript and you learn deeply. There's a lot of good books out there like this for JavaScript, also for HTML and for CSS. Start on HTML. Start on CSS, then jump into JavaScript, learn it deeply. I also recommend that you definitely get more involved in social media. Hop on Twitter, follow 100 Days of Code. There's a hashtag 100 Days of Code. There's hashtag web development. There's hashtag code newbie, code newbies. There's hashtag women who code. There's tons of groups out there on Twitter that have people that can help you learn or know what to learn from. And there's also people out there who shared their experience learning to be a developer without a degree. You can learn from them. So I highly recommend that you get out there and get involved in the social media aspect. It also is good for building connections and maybe even will help you find that job later. So, you can learn a lot from reading a structured book. You can learn a lot from watching our videos here at the Coding Zoo and other YouTube channels. You can learn a lot from, taking courses on Udemy Code Academy or freecodecamp.org. I highly recommend all of these options. But I also recommend is build something. Once you start learning enough, start building something. Come up with your own little project. Start building web pages, right? Building web pages that use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Start creating your own little projects. Consider it an art. You're creating your own little projects. Create your own web pages. Come up with some ideas and start putting it in practice. Start building stuff from end to end. A complete web page that uses all 3 of those technologies. So once you start learning the basics, once you start learning deeply through the books and YouTube and the courses, then start building stuff. Make sure you can put those things into practice. It's not just in your head, but you can actually do it. How do you get that job? Once you've learned everything, once you feel confident, how do you get that job? How do you get your foot in the door of a company? Let's talk about those things. Well, I just mentioned about in learning, I just mentioned about creating your own projects. One of the first things you want to do is, as you create your own projects, create a portfolio website. Create an awesome HTML, CSS website that it's basically considered your portfolio. Point to some things you've built. Create your online resume. Have it online. That's one of the first steps is to build that. As you build projects, as you work on projects or create your own web pages, put those projects in GitHub. Learn how to use GitHub, create your own little GitHub and start putting your projects there. You're going to point to those projects later as part of your portfolio. You're going to show people that you can put what you've learned into practice. You want to do that, right? What if you can't come up with projects on your own to build or web pages on your own to build? Well, reach out to people. Do you have family members who have a business that need a web page? Do you have a local charity, a local church, or local organization that you could help build web pages for? Now, a lot of people will tell you, don't give your talent away for free or for pennies. Well, when you're first starting out, you need experience. And if that experience, if you're going to do it for like a charity, if you're going to do it for free at first or for pennies, that's fine. I've heard people recommend don't do it because you're giving away your talent for nothing. Well, that's not true. You need experience to get your foot in the door. Having those things on your portfolio. If you can't build your portfolio any other way, then work for charities. Build web page. Find a local business that doesn't have a web page that you happen to like. Build a web page for them. Give it to them for free, or go to them and say, hey, then, build a web page for them, take it to them and say, hey, would you like to buy this? Right? Build a portfolio. Look for creative avenues to build stuff for other people. At the very least, of course, you want to build your portfolio website or resume website for yourself. At the very least. Now, if you can't find those things, you can always create fun little projects. Build a game or a website game in JavaScript. Build something creative. Just practice. But one way to actually build stuff for people is go out to places like Fiverr, Fiverr.com. I think it's Fiverr.com, Fiverr. Search for Fiverr, you'll find it. You could actually put your services up for sale there to build a web page for someone, right? And take on jobs that you know you can handle. Don't take on too much, but find a good job there on Fiverr. Build a web page for somebody. Doesn't matter how much you charge them. Build a web page for somebody. If they use it, hey, that goes on your portfolio. That's a good thing for your portfolio. Now, we've mentioned definitely want to be involved in social media. You want to network, right? One way to learn is through social media and through these hashtags that I mentioned earlier, networking with people, learning from them. But it's also a good way to find out how other people are reaching out to companies, getting their foot in the door. Be active on social media. Go to your local user group. Most of the cities, bigger cities, have Java or web development user groups. Go to those meetups, attend those meetups, meet people. Oftentimes you'll have companies there even looking to hire people. Join those user groups, be involved, build some connections. You also want to consider, as part of building that social media presence, create a LinkedIn account, get yourself on LinkedIn, put a link from LinkedIn to your portfolio website, put all your information out on LinkedIn. That's one way to find recruiters who are looking for people to hire. One thing you can also consider is, you don't necessarily have to get that full-time job with a company right away. Sometimes getting your foot in the door means contracting for a contracting company. Oftentimes, if you're starting out, that's a good way to get experience. A lot of people do it full-time. They're contractors full-time. Some people prefer to work directly for a particular company versus contracting. But for sure, contracting is definitely a good way to get experience. Find a contracting company. They're everywhere. Recruiters for contracting companies are everywhere. And contracting is a good way to get that experience. And the bar sometimes can be a little lower in contracting. One thing about contracting is if you work for a given company and if you're not working out, it's easy for them to grab somebody else and fill that position. So I oftentimes, maybe I'm wrong, don't quote me, but I feel like the bar is a little bit lower for getting your foot in the door with contracting. So work with a contractor, a recruiter, become a contractor, get your foot in the door, work hard, show them that you're one of the ones that's worth hiring full-time, then get hired full-time for a company. Now, as you start getting opportunities, as you start applying for jobs, right? You've got your portfolio website, you've got your presence on LinkedIn, you're starting to apply for jobs, you've created a resume, you're pointing to your portfolio, here's networking. As you start getting job interviews, you need to be prepared, right? How can you be prepared? Well, you definitely want to practice coding problems, coding questions, right? You want to practice interview questions. You want to practice interviewing for jobs. Interviewing is an art. I've been an engineer for 20 years. I've been very successful at every company I've worked at. But when it comes to interviewing, even for me, it's kind of a coin toss. You have to be confident. You have to know how to answer certain questions a certain way. You need to be practiced in interviewing. You need to be practiced in answering interview questions and coding questions. Oftentimes, the questions and things that are asked there are not necessarily things that are going to be used on the job as much as you might think, unfortunately. So be prepared for coding interviews. Practice them. Practice answering interview questions. Practice answering coding questions on a whiteboard or on a notepad. Just practice, practice, practice. It's very important. And even do mock interviews. Do mock interviews with people. Now, one good way to practice for interviews is to get the book Cracking the Coding Interview. Cracking the Coding Interview. It's a great book. It will teach you how to be prepared for interviewing. Again, Cracking the Coding Interview. I think I have it right here. This is from Gail, and forgive me if I say it wrong. Lockman McDowell. Gail Lockman McDowell. Great book. This book is awesome. Even with all the experience that I have, I often will, if I'm switching to switch jobs, I want to practice. I go back to this to remind me of certain things I need to practice on. It's a great book, so highly recommended. So again, be sure you're prepared for interviews, and it takes time. Don't give up. One of the things you must have to become a software engineer without a degree is determination. You've got to be determined. You may go through 50, 60, 70 interviews before you finally get your foot in the door. It takes time and it takes a lot of practice. Don't give up. Keep trying, keep learning. If you like learning, keep it up, keep learning. You can do it. You will succeed, I guarantee you. There's a lot of jobs out there. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please, hey guys, click the thumbs up. That really helps us get the word out. It helps this channel a lot. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions about what I've said today, leave me a message below. I'm very good at responding to comments below, and I always try to get back to you. So definitely leave me a comment below. Check out the rest of our videos. Check out our HTML building blocks. Check out our JavaScript building blocks. Check out our CSS building block videos. They're really good videos to start with also. If you are starting your adventure on becoming a software engineer, you've decided you're going to learn on your own and do that. Hey, best of luck, best wishes. You can do it. Just follow these items. Don't give up. Be determined. Keep learning. You will make it. It took me 3 or 4 years to finally get my foot in the door. Actually, 2 or 3 years to finally get my foot in the door. And I've been doing it for 20 years since. So you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. Keep up the hard work. You will get there. Just be determined. So, hey, again, if you liked the video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed yet, click subscribe. It really helps us out a lot. And if you know somebody who might benefit from hearing this video, send them a link to this video, pass it around. We really appreciate it. Thank you for watching today, and best of luck to your job adventure. Have a great day.